Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Light and Shadow podcast. I am Gray, your spiritual mentor and guide, and today we are going to question everything you have been taught about heaven. What if heaven isn't a place you go to after you die? What if it's not up there in the clouds, separate from earth, waiting for you to earn entry? What if heaven is a dimension of consciousness, a frequency, a state of being that exists right here, right now? And you can access it while you are still alive. What if the reason most people cannot access it isn't because they are not worthy, but because they are operating at the wrong frequency? Like trying to tune into an FM station with an AM radio. The signal is there. You're just not calibrated to receive it. Today, we are diving into the dimensional theory of heaven. We're going to explore consciousness as multidimensional, heaven and hell as frequency states rather than geographic locations, what quantum physics reveal about parallel dimensions existing simultaneously, and why mystics throughout history have said the kingdom of heaven is within you. This is not Sunday school theology. This is physics, philosophy, and metaphysics converging to challenge everything you thought you knew about the afterlife, consciousness, and reality itself. I'm going to ask you questions that might be uncomfortable. I am going to present ideas that might contradict what you were raised to believe. And I am going to invite you to think critically, not to just accept, but examine. Because the truth isn't threatened by questions. Only dogma is. So let's begin. Before we explore what heaven might actually be, let's examine the problems with the traditional concept. Traditional theology teaches that heaven is a place, a physical or quasi-physical realm up there beyond the sky, separate from earth. But here's the question. Where is up? We live in a spherical planet rotating in space. Up from America points in a completely different direction than up from China. If you go far enough up, you're just moving through space. Where exactly is this physical heaven located? And if heaven is beyond the physical universe entirely, in what sense? Is it a place at all? How can something beyond space and time occupy a location? The geographic model of heaven made sense when humans thought that Earth was flat with a dome sky, heaven above, hell below, Earth in the middle. But we know that's not how reality is structured. So if heaven isn't a location in physical space, what is it? Traditional teaching creates a fundamental separation. Earth, which is the bad, the temporary, or the fallen, versus heaven, the good, the eternal, the perfect. This dualistic model suggests that the material world and the spiritual world are separate realms, and you have to leave one to enter the other. But consider this. What if that separation is an illusion? What if spirit and matter aren't separate, but are different densities of the same substance, like ice and water? Different forms, but same essence. What if heaven isn't separate from earth, but is a different dimensional experience of the same reality? So why would an infinite, omnipresent God create a universe mostly devoid of divine presence with heaven segregated in one tiny corner? Traditional theology says you go to heaven after you die. Heaven is future tense, something you access later. But here's the paradox. If heaven exists in eternity, beyond time, then after you die, doesn't make sense. There is no after in timelessness. If heaven is eternal, it exists now just as much as it will exist later. The only difference is your consciousness, your ability to perceive it. Mystics have always said the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Not coming soon, not waiting for you in the future, at hand, here, now. So what if heaven isn't a future destination, but a present reality you are currently unable to perceive? Many religions or many religious traditions teach that heaven is earned through good behavior, belief, rituals, or divine grace. This creates a transactional model. Behave correctly, believe correctly, and you get rewarded with heaven. Fail, and you are excluded. But consider this. If heaven is the natural state of consciousness aligned with divine frequency, it is not about worthiness, it is about resonance. You don't earn the ability to perceive radio waves. You calibrate your receiver to the right frequency. The waves are always there, regardless of your worthiness. What if access to heaven isn't about moral scorecard, but about consciousness calibration? These aren't attacks on faith. These are invitations to think deeper, to question assumptions, to explore what heaven might actually be beyond the limitations of ancient cosmology. Now let's build a new framework, starting with the nature of consciousness itself. When we talk about dimensions, most people think first dimension is the line, the second dimension is the plane, the third dimension is the space, and the fourth dimension is the time. But dimensions aren't just geometric. Dimensions can be states of consciousness, frequencies of awareness, levels of reality perception. Think of dimensions like radio frequencies. All frequencies exist simultaneously in the electromagnetic spectrum, but you only perceive the one you are tuned to. Change the dial, and you access a completely different reality. Heaven might be a higher dimensional frequency of consciousness that exists in the same space as your current reality. You just can't perceive it because you are tuned to a different frequency. Quantum physics suggests that multiple realities, multiple dimensions exist simultaneously in superposition. The observer effect shows that consciousness determines which reality you experience. You're not observing one objective reality. You are collapsing one possibility from infinite potential based on your frequency. What if heaven and earth aren't separate places but different dimensional states of the same quantum field? What if dying isn't traveling somewhere else but shifting frequency, changing your consciousness bandwidth so you perceive a different dimensional layer of reality? Imagine consciousness as a spectrum, like light. Lower frequency is the infrared, dense, material focused, survival, fear, separation, consciousness, experiencing reality as solid, separate, limited. This is what some traditions call hell consciousness. Not a place, it's a state. Now the middle frequencies, which are the visible lights, human consciousness, mix of material and spiritual awareness, duality, the good and bad, pleasure and pain, self and the other. This is the standard waking state most people experience. Now higher frequencies, which is the ultraviolet and beyond. Expanded, unified consciousness, experiencing reality as interconnected, limitless, eternal. Union with the divine, dissolution of the separation. This is what traditions call heaven consciousness. All frequencies exist simultaneously. The visible light spectrum doesn't negate infrared or ultraviolet. They are all there, all real, just perceived differently based on the observer's capacity. So what if you are already surrounded by heavenly dimensions but cannot perceive them because your consciousness is calibrated to a lower frequency? Remember the holographic universe principle? Every part contains the whole. Heaven isn't somewhere else. It is encoded in every point of reality, including right where you are. It's like a holographic image. From one angle, you see one thing. From another angle, you see something completely different. But both exist in the same space. Heaven and earth might be different perspectives, on the same holographic reality. Consider near-death experiences. People report leaving their body, entering realms of light, peace, and unconditional love, meeting deceased loved ones or divine beings, experiencing timelessness and unity. Then they come back to their body, and earth feels dense, heavy, limited by comparison. Were they traveling somewhere, or were they experiencing a frequency shift? When consciousness begins separating from the physical body, it's no longer anchored to the dense material frequency. It naturally rises to higher frequencies, what we call heaven. The experience isn't geographical, it is dimensional. It is consciousness accessing frequencies normally filtered out by physical embodiment. If dying is a frequency shift rather than a location change, could you access higher frequencies without dying? This is where it gets interesting. If heaven is a frequency, not a place, then theoretically, you could tune into that frequency while still alive. Let's go deeper into heaven and hell as consciousness frequencies rather than destinations. Traditional religion describes hell as a place of eternal torment, fire, separation from God. But what if hell is a state of consciousness, the frequency of complete separation, fear, suffering, and disconnection? Hell consciousness is total identification with ego and separation, believing you are alone, cut off from source, living in fear, shame, guilt, and hatred, experiencing reality as hostile, scarce, and punishing, and being trapped in the illusion that you are separate from the divine. You don't have to die to experience this. People live in hell consciousness right now, consumed by addiction, hatred, despair, believing they are irredeemable and alone. Hell isn't punishment from an external God. Hell is the nature consequence of consciousness operating at the lowest possible frequency. It is not that God sends you there. It's that you cannot perceive God when you are operating at that frequency. Like being in the dark room with the lights on, but your eyes closed. The light is there. You just can't see it. How much of a human suffering is self-created hell, consciousness trapped in the lower frequencies of fear and separation? If hell is a frequency of separation, heaven is a frequency of union. Heaven consciousness is experiencing yourself as one with the divine, living in love, peace, joy, freedom, perceiving reality as abundant, benevolent, interconnected, and knowing yourself as eternal consciousness, not just a temporary body, and feeling utterly safe, held, and loved unconditionally. This isn't wishful thinking. This is what mystics of every tradition describe when they touch higher consciousness. Buddhists call it nirvana. Hindus call it samadhi. Christians call it union with God. Sufis call it fana, or the annihilation of ego, remaining in God. They're describing a frequency shift, a dimensional expansion, a state of consciousness where the illusion of separation dissolves and you experience heaven directly. And here's the key. They access this while alive. Some traditions include purgatory, a state of purification between death and heaven. What if purgatory is a process of consciousness recalibrating? When you die operating at a lower frequency, fear, attachment, unresolved wounds, your consciousness cannot immediately access the highest frequencies. It needs to release the dense vibrations first. Not as punishment, but as physics. Like removing static from a radio signal so the clear frequency can come through. Purgatory might be the soul releasing attachments, healing wounds, clearing karma, raising its frequency until it can perceive and exist comfortably in the higher dimensions. If consciousness needs to calibrate to higher frequencies to access heaven, why wait until death? Why not do the frequency work now? Most people don't live in pure heaven or pure hell consciousness. They fluctuate along the spectrum. The moments of heaven are deep meditation, falling in love, holding your child, experiencing beauty, moments of profound peace, feeling connected to everything. The moments of hell are anxiety attacks, deep depressions, trauma, addiction, rage, feeling utterly alone and worthless. The most of life is somewhere in the middle, oscillating between higher and lower frequencies depending on thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and experience. So what if spiritual practice is learning to stabilize at higher frequencies? To spend more time in heaven consciousness and less in hell consciousness? Here's the radical realization. God doesn't keep you out of heaven. Heaven does not exclude you. You simply cannot perceive it when you are operating on incompatible frequencies. It's not moral judgment, it is physics. A being vibrating at the frequency of hatred cannot perceive the dimension vibrating at pure love, not because love rejects them, but because they are literally on different channels. Heaven is always broadcasting. The question is, are you tuned in? This reframes everything. Heaven is not something you hope to deserve someday. It is something you can access right now by raising your frequency. Now let's explore what might be the most radical teaching in all of spirituality, one that most religious institutions have spent centuries trying to suppress or reinterpret. What Jesus actually said. The kingdom of heaven is within you. Luke 17:21. Not will be within you after you die. Not is waiting for you in the sky. Is within you now. The kingdom of heaven is at hand, Matthew 4:17. Not coming soon. Not far away, at hand, here, accessible. These are not metaphors. What if Jesus was teaching dimensional consciousness? What if he was saying the highest frequency of reality, the divine dimension, the state of union with God, it's not separate from you. It is not somewhere else. It is within your consciousness, accessible in this moment. Mystics throughout history have understood this. Eckhart said, God is at home. It is we who have gone out for a walk. Rumi says, you are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in a drop. The Hindu scripture, Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that, you are the divine. The Buddhist teaching, nirvana and samsara, the suffering are not two different places. They are two ways of experiencing the same reality based on your consciousness. They're all saying the same thing. The divine dimension, the heavenly state, is not separate from you. It is your true nature, obscured by identification with lower frequencies. What separates you from heaven is not distance. It is a veil of perception. The veil is made of identification with the physical body as all you are, is belief in separation from the divine, is attachment to thoughts, emotions, stories, ego, is operating at lower frequencies of fear, judgment, and scarcity. When the veil thins or drops, you experience heaven directly. This is where deep meditation, where ego dissolves. Probably psychedelic experiences that expand consciousness beyond normal parameters. The near-death experiences, spontaneous mystical awakenings, and moments of profound presence and unity. People report the same thing. It was more real than this reality. I saw that everything is love. I knew I was never separate from God. I experienced eternity. They didn't go somewhere. The veil lifted. They accessed the dimension that was always there. So if the kingdom of heaven is within you, why are you looking for it outside yourself? If heaven is a dimension of consciousness, then accessing it is about consciousness expansion, not moral perfection. So here are some practices that raise frequency and thin the veil. Number 1, meditation. Quieting the ego mind so you can access awareness beyond thought. Presence, fully inhabiting the now where eternity exists. Third is love, the highest frequency emotion that aligns you with divine consciousness. Gratitude. Appreciation raises frequency immediately. Service, which is dissolving ego through selfless contribution. And forgiveness, releasing lower frequencies of resentment and separation. As well as contemplation, questioning reality beyond surface appearances. And finally, surrender, releasing control, and trusting the divine flow. These aren't earning heaven. These are tuning your consciousness to perceive the heavenly dimension that's always been there and here. So if heaven is within, accessible now through consciousness, death isn't the only gateway. You don't have to wait to experience divine union, eternal peace, and unconditional love. And religion becomes technology. Prayer, meditation, ritual aren't about appeasing an external God. They are technologies for consciousness expansion. You're not broken or fallen. You are divine consciousness temporarily experiencing limitation, learning to remember what you are. Salvation is not external. No one can save you from outside. Awakening is remembering what you have always been. Consciousness experiencing itself. So heaven and earth can interpenetrate. You can walk through daily life perceiving both dimensions simultaneously, the sacred within the mundane. So what if you have been searching outside for something that was never lost, only forgotten? This is what Buddha meant by awakening, what Christ meant by being born again, what mystics meant by enlightenment. It is not becoming something new, it is remembering what you have always been, consciousness, capable of perceiving infinite dimensions, including the one called heaven. Let's get into the mechanics now. If heaven is a dimension, how does this actually work? String theory in physics proposes that reality has 10 or 11 dimensions, most of which we cannot perceive. We experience 3 spatial dimensions plus 1 time dimension, which is 4D reality. But mathematics suggests there are additional dimensions curled up at quantum scales or existing at frequencies we cannot detect. What if some of these dimensions are consciousness dimensions? What if heaven, hell, and other spiritual realms exist in higher dimensions that intersect with our 4D reality but remain invisible to us because our consciousness is calibrated to perceive only this bandwidth? Imagine a 2D being living in flatland, a completely flat plane. They can perceive length and width, but have no concept of height. A 3D sphere passing through flatland would appear to the 2D being as a circle that appears, grows, shrinks, and disappears. They cannot perceive the full sphere, only the cross-section intersecting their dimension. You might be like the flatland being. Heaven, the higher consciousness, might be intersecting with your reality constantly, but you can only perceive the tiny cross-section available to your pure consciousness calibration. So when you expand consciousness, raise frequency, you gain access to perceive more dimensions. Suddenly you see that what looked like separate, disconnected events in your 3D perception are actually part of one unified pattern when viewed from higher dimensions. In physics, higher frequencies carry more energy and information. Higher vibrations can access states that lower vibrations cannot. In consciousness, the lower frequencies equal denser, more limited perception, hell consciousness, and higher frequencies are expanded, unified perception, heaven consciousness. You're not changing location, you are changing vibrational frequency, which gives you access to different dimensional bandwidths. When the physical body dies, consciousness is no longer anchored to the dense material frequency. Now here two possibilities emerge. Possibility one is consciousness freed from physical anchoring naturally rises to its inherent frequency. If you have cultivated higher frequencies in life, like love, compassion, and presence, your consciousness rises to higher dimensions, which is the heaven. If you have reinforced lower frequencies, fear, hatred, separation, you experience lower dimensions, which is hell, until you can release those vibrations. Possibility two is consciousness doesn't go anywhere. It simply perceives reality from a different dimensional perspective. Heaven and earth exist in the same space, you just couldn't see heaven while anchored in physical density. Death removes the anchor, and suddenly you perceive the full dimensional spectrum. Both models suggest the same thing. Heaven isn't elsewhere, it is a frequency you access through consciousness. Some spiritual traditions describe multiple heavens, multiple hells, multiple planes of existence. But what if these are gradations of consciousness frequency? Not literal locations stacked like floors in a building, but dimensional bandwidths arranged by frequency. For example, lowest frequencies is the hell realms, dense suffering. Low middle frequencies is the earth-like material planes. Middle frequencies is the astral planes, where thought creates reality more fluidly. Higher frequencies, the celestial planes, angelic dimensions, light realms. The highest frequencies, the unity consciousness, formless divine awareness, what some call the Godhead. You move through these not by traveling, but by raising or lowering your consciousness frequency. Here's where it gets truly wild. What if you exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, but your awareness is focused primarily on one? Like a video game character. The full game world exists, but your screen only shows the area you are focused on. So your consciousness might already be in heaven, but your attention is so contracted into the dense material frequency that you cannot perceive the rest. Meditation, psychedelics, near-death experiences, mystical experiences, these expand your awareness to perceive dimensions of yourself that were always there but hidden from view. So what if the quest for heaven isn't about going somewhere, but it's about expanding awareness to see where you already are? If this is accurate, then your consciousness work now directly affects your dimensional experience after death. You're not gambling on being good enough. You're literally calibrating your frequency. Heaven and hell are self-created, not as punishment or a reward, but as a natural consequence of your consciousness frequency. You can preview heaven now. Any moment, you can access higher frequencies, peace, love, unity, presence. You are touching the heavenly dimension. Death isn't scary. It's just a shift in perception, like taking off glasses that were limiting your view. You are not waiting for God to judge you worthy. You are becoming the frequency that naturally perceives God. Now I want to leave you with some questions. Not to answer. For you, I want you to sit with, contemplate, and explore. If heaven is a state of consciousness, not a plane, not a place, what does that say about religious teachings that promise or threaten you with location-based afterlife? Are they misunderstanding? Simplifying for control? Speaking metaphorically but being taken literally? If you can access heaven consciousness now, why don't more people? What keeps a humanity locked in lower frequencies? Is it fear? Conditioning? Identification with ego? Comfort in the familiar? Societal structure that benefit from people staying asleep? If hell is a self-created frequency of consciousness, is eternal damnation possible? Or is it simply consciousness stuck in lower frequencies until it chooses to rise? Can you be stuck eternally if consciousness is always free to change? Or does the pain of lower frequencies eventually catalyze the choice to ascend? What if religious institutions have been teaching dimensional physics all along, but the message got distorted into literal geography and moral scorekeeping? The question, what was the original teaching before it was institutionalized? What did the mystics understand that got lost in translation? And if you're already in heaven, but cannot perceive it, what would need to shift in your consciousness for the veil to lift? What beliefs would you need to release? What frequencies would you need to cultivate? What practices would you open your perception? And if near-death experiences give people glimpses of higher dimensions, what does that suggest about the relationship between body and consciousness? Is consciousness produced by the brain? Or does the brain limit consciousness? Does death expand awareness? Or simply remove the filter? If this dimensional model is true, what does salvation actually mean? Is it saving you from hell? Or is it awakening you to the heaven you've always been in, but couldn't see? Why would the teaching, the kingdom of heaven is within you, be suppressed or de-emphasized by religious institutions? What changes if people realize they don't need external intermediaries to access the divine? I don't expect you to have answers. These questions are meant to crack open your perception, to invite you to explore beyond what you have been told to believe. Heaven is not a place you go to after you die if you have been good enough. Hell is not a location you are sent to for eternal punishment. Heaven and hell are dimensions of consciousness, frequencies of awareness that exist right here, right now, interpenetrating this reality. Heaven is the frequency of union, love, peace, divine awareness. Hell is a frequency of separation, fear, suffering, and disconnection. You are consciousness capable of tuning into any frequency on the spectrum. The dimension you experience is determined not by external judgment, but by your internal calibration. The mystics were always right. The kingdom of heaven is within you. Not will be, not might be, is. The question is, can you perceive it? Are you tuned to the right frequency? And if not, what practices, beliefs, and shifts in consciousness would allow you to access the heavenly dimension while you are still alive? You don't have to wait for death to experience divine consciousness, eternal peace, unconditional love. You can access it now by raising your frequency, thinning the veil, expanding your awareness beyond the limitations of ego and fear. This is the original teaching, found in every mystical tradition before it was flattened into literal geography and moral transactions. You are multidimensional consciousness, currently focused on one frequency band. So expand, rise, remember. Heaven has always been here. You have just been looking in the wrong direction. If you want guidance in raising your frequency and accessing higher dimensions of consciousness, I'd be honored to support you. You can find all my information about my mentorship and coaching in the link in the bio, the description below. Thank you for thinking with me today. Thank you for questioning. And thank you for being willing to explore beyond the comfortable answers. Heaven is not somewhere else. It is a frequency, and you can tune in anytime you choose. Until next time.